Growing up in the shadow of the Cryale Forest, you learn two things very quickly. First, you never step off the main road after sunset. Second, and most importantly, you never, under any circumstances, go looking for the treehouse. My name is Elias. I haven't been back to the town of Duskford in 15 years. It's a small, dying town on the edge of the Eldoria region, a place where the fog clings to the ground like a suffocating blanket, and the locals speak in hushed tones about things they can't explain. I left the moment I turned 18, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere. But, like a moth to a flame, or perhaps a fly to a spider web, I found myself driving back. My grandfather had passed away, leaving me his estate, which unfortunately bordered the tree line of Cryale. I arrived in the late afternoon. The town looked exactly as I remembered it, gray, silent, and decaying. After dropping my bags at the old house, I found myself standing on the back porch staring at the wall of pine and ancient oak trees that marked the beginning of the forest. The locals called it the Weeping Woods because of the constant dripping sound that echoed from within, even when it hadn't rained for days. The legend of the Forbidden Tree House was the boogeyman of my childhood. They said it was built 50 years ago by a man who hated the noise of the town. He took his children out there to live in peace. They were never seen again. When the police finally raided the woods, they found the treehouse empty, but the walls were covered in scratches, and the floor was stained with something that wouldn't wash out. Since then, hunters and hikers who'd ventured too deep would report hearing laughter, childish, innocent laughter, coming from the canopy. Some of them came back with strange marks on their skin. Others didn't come back at all. I told myself I was an adult now. I told myself that ghost stories were just that, stories. I grabbed a flashlight, zipped up my jacket against the biting autumn chill, and stepped off the porch. I didn't intend to find the treehouse. I just wanted to walk the perimeter, to prove to myself that the fear I felt in my gut was irrational. The moment I crossed the tree line, the sound of the town vanished. It was abrupt, like someone had hit a mute button on the world. No distant cars, no barking dogs, just the sound of my boots crushing dead leaves and that rhythmic, wet dripping sound from the trees. Drip, drip, drip. I walked for about 20 minutes. The trees in Cryale are old, their branches twisted and garneled, reaching out like skeletal fingers. The further I went, the darker it got. Even though the sun hadn't fully set, the canopy was so thick it choked out the light. I was about to turn back when I saw it. In a small clearing that shouldn't have existed, surrounded by a ring of dead, blackened grass, stood the great oak. And nestled high in its rotting branches was the structure. It didn't look like a place for children. It looked like a tumor growing out of the wood. The boards were gray and warped, nailed together in a chaotic frenzy. A rope ladder, frayed and green with moss, dangled a few feet above the ground, swaying gently in a wind I couldn't feel. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I should have turned around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But then I heard it, a giggle. It came from directly above me, soft, playful, and terrifyingly clear. He came back. He wants to play.
"Who's there?" I called out, aiming my flashlight into the canopy. My voice sounded small, swallowed instantly by the dense forest. The beam of light cut through the mist, illuminating twisted branches and gray moss, but nothing else. The treehouse sat silent and dark above me, like a brooding sentinel. There was no answer, just the wind sighing through the pines and that maddening rhythmic dripping. Drip, drip, drip. "I know, I heard something," I muttered, my grip tightening on the flashlight. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, teenagers from Duskford trying to scare the new owner of the old estate. It made sense. It had to be that. I took a step back, intending to leave. "Very funny," I shouted, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. "You kids better clear out. This is private property." I turned around to head back toward the path I had come from, but as I swept my flashlight across the ground, the beam landed on something that made my blood run cold. Lying in the dead grass, right where I had just walked, was a ball. It was an old red rubber ball, the kind you'd play dodgeball with in gym class. It was faded and covered in grime, but what terrified me was that it hadn't been there a minute ago. I would have stepped on it. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Slowly, tentatively, I reached out with my foot and nudged it. It rolled a few inches and hit a tree root. Giggle. The sound came from behind me this time, from the direction of the treehouse. "Found you," a different voice whispered. This one sounded younger, a little girl. I spun around, shining the light back at the great oak. "Show yourselves," I yelled. This time I saw movement. The rope ladder, which had been hanging still, was now swinging violently as if someone had just scrambled up it. My rational mind was screaming at me to run, to sprint back to the safety of the house and lock the doors. But a strange, morbid curiosity held me in place. I approached the tree. Carved into the bark of the massive trunk, roughly at eye level, was a fresh scratching. Sap was still oozing from the wounds in the wood. It was a crude drawing of a face, a stick figure face with a wide, toothy grin and X's for eyes. Below it, scratched in jagged letters, were the words, "Hide and seek." "I'm not playing," I said, my voice trembling. "But you're already it," the boy's voice whispered from the darkness above. "Start counting. 1, 2. A pine cone hit me on the shoulder, then another, then a stone. 3, 4. The voices were multiplying. It wasn't just one or two children anymore. It sounded like a playground. Dozens of whispers, giggles, and hushed conversations filled the air around me, echoing from the trees, from the bushes, from the ground itself. 5, 6. I didn't wait for 7. I ran. I sprinted into the darkness, not caring about the noise I was making. I just needed to get away from that tree, away from those voices. I ran for what felt like 10 minutes, my lungs burning, branches whipping my face. I should have reached the edge of the forest. I should have seen the lights of my grandfather's house. But when I finally stopped to catch my breath and looked around, my knees buckled. I wasn't at the edge of the forest. I was back in the clearing, and standing directly in front of me, looming in the mist, was the forbidden treehouse. My mind couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. The clearing, the dead grass, the great oak, it was impossible. I had run in a straight line away from it. I had followed the slope of the land downward, away from the rise where the tree stood. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't real." I backed away, my eyes locked on the treehouse. The structure seemed taller now, more imposing. The gray boards looked wet, slick with moisture that wasn't just dew. And the rope ladder? It was swaying again. 7, 8. The counting continued, but the voice had changed. It wasn't just the boy anymore. It was a chorus, a dozen children chanting in unison, their voices overlapping, creating a dissonant, headache-inducing hum. 9, 10, ready or not, here we come! The forest erupted. It wasn't an explosion of fire or noise, but of movement. From the shadows beneath the trees, shapes began to emerge. Small, pale shapes. They moved on all fours, scuttling like spiders, but their limbs were unmistakably human. They were children, or what used to be children. Their skin was gray and translucent, pulled tight over their bones. Their clothes were tattered rags, remnants of eras long past. But their faces were the worst part. Where their eyes should have been, there were only deep, dark hollows, and their mouths were stitched shut with thick, black thread. They didn't scream, they didn't growl, they just moved toward me, silent and swift, a tide of pale limbs and empty sockets. I didn't think, I just reacted. I spun around and ran again, this time choosing a different direction, forcing myself through a thicket of holly bushes. The thorns tore at my jeans, drawing blood, but the pain was distant, dull compared to the terror freezing my veins. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing against the trunk of a large pine tree. I sat there, gasping for air, clutching my chest. I listened. Silence. The chanting had stopped. The scuttling sounds were gone. Had I lost them? I pulled out my phone. Still no signal. The screen flickered, the battery draining rapidly before my eyes. 20%, 15%, 10%. Then the flashlight on my phone flickered and died. I was plunged into absolute darkness. I fumbled for the heavy flashlight I had brought with me, clicking it on. The beam was weak, the batteries fading fast. In the dim yellow light, I saw something carved into the tree trunk right next to my head. It was another face, the same crude stick figure with the wide grin and X eyes. But this time, there was an arrow pointing down, and below the arrow, the words, "Look down." I slowly lowered the beam of my flashlight to the ground between my feet. The earth was disturbed, freshly dug, and protruding from the loose soil was a hand, a small, gray child's hand. And it was moving, its fingers curled and uncurled, clawing at the air, reaching for my ankle. I scrambled backward, kicking at the dirt, screaming as more hands began to burst from the ground around me. It wasn't just one grave. The entire forest floor was churning. They were coming up from below. I was standing on a graveyard. "You found us," the voices whispered, no longer from the trees but from the earth beneath me. "Now we find you!" I scrambled to my feet and ran again, dodging the grasping hands that erupted from the soil like weeds. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop. But no matter which way I turned, the trees seemed to shift, guiding me, hurting me. And then I saw it again. The clearing, the dead grass, the forbidden treehouse. I wasn't running away. I was running in circles. Or rather, the forest was spinning around me, keeping me trapped in its center.
I couldn't run anymore. My body was broken, my spirit crushed. The forest had made its point. There was no escape. The only way out was up. I walked toward the great oak. The voices stopped immediately. The hands retreated into the earth. The forest fell into a heavy, expectant silence. They wanted me to go in. I gripped the mossy rope ladder. It felt slimy, like clutching dead skin. I pulled myself up, rung by rung, the wood groaning under my weight. When I reached the platform, the smell hit me. Not rot, not decay, but something old and musty, like a room that hasn't been opened in 100 years. The door to the treehouse hung open, swinging gently on rusted hinges. I shone my dying flashlight into the darkness. "Hello?" I whispered. Inside, it wasn't a monster's lair. It was a child's bedroom, a perfectly preserved bedroom from the 1970s. There was a small bed with a dust-covered quilt, a wooden rocking horse in the corner, and drawings. Hundreds of drawings tacked to the walls. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking. I looked closer at the drawings. They were crude crayon sketches, but they depicted scenes of horrific violence. People burning, cars crashing, and in every single drawing, standing in the background, was a tall, dark treehouse. On the small desk near the window, a tape recorder sat waiting. A red light was blinking. It was recording. I reached out with a trembling hand and pressed the stop button. Then I pressed rewind, and then play. My own voice played back to me. "Who's there? I know I heard something. No, this isn't real." It was a compilation of everything I had said since entering the woods, every scream, every whisper, every breath. Then the tape ended, and a new voice spoke from the recorder, a voice that sounded exactly like me, older, wearier. "You're finally here, Elias. We've been waiting for the new groundskeeper." The door behind me slammed shut. The flashlight flickered and died completely. In the pitch black, I felt a small, cold hand slip into mine. "Tag," a child's voice whispered right into my ear. "You're it, forever." I opened my eyes. The fear was gone. The cold was gone. I wasn't in the bedroom anymore. I was standing up high, looking down from the treehouse window. Below me, walking into the clearing, I saw a boy.
He looked confused, scared. He was holding a backpack. It was me. It was Elias, from yesterday, or maybe tomorrow. I tried to scream, "Run!" but my mouth wouldn't move. Instead, I felt a hunger, a twisted need to play. I watched myself climb the ladder, and I retreated into the shadows of the room. I understand now. The game never ends. Players just change sides. I smiled and whispered to the boy coming through the door, "Ready or not, here I come."